Hello. I'm going to be talking about my favorite Arbites build for Havoc. I have two other builds that I play pretty regularly, but this one is probably my best performing out of them. I'll cover most of the weapons that I think are the strongest, and I will go through each perk, explain why I pick it, and offer some other perk suggestions. So starting off on the weapons, I generally think the Arbites Shock Maul and the Riot Shield are the strongest Arbites weapons. The Crusher is okay, the Tack Axe is okay, but I generally think the Shock Maul and the Shield are strongest. For the Shock Maul, or for both of the weapons, I should say, the perks I generally prefer are Carapace Unyielding, since that is generally going to be many of the problem enemies in Havoc. Flak is okay as well. Something to worth note on this build, we are using Dog, and the actual perks and some of the blessings on the weapons will affect some of our dog damage. So that's something to keep in mind. For blessings, I think High Voltage Execution are by far the best blessings. I guess there's an argument to be made for Relentless Strike, but I don't think it's good enough to take over these two. For the Riot Shield, same thing, Unyielding Carapace is generally what I prefer. Flak is okay. I'm not really a fan of any other perks, to be honest, on Havoc anyway. For Blessings, I think I generally prefer Opportunist all the time. High Voltage is just more damage, but I think there is also an argument to be made for Last Guard. It doesn't always, it's not always going to save you every run, but there have been runs where it has saved me. And, you're losing a little bit of damage if you take off one of these. So that's kind of up to you if you think that being able to push enemies on your block broken is worth it. I would say generally it's not, but it can be kind of fun to make a super tanky build. But yeah, generally I'll just run a High Voltage Opportunist unless I'm doing like duos or something. For ranged, I generally prefer the bolt gun. I haven't had a lot of time to try the new mark of the bolt gun, or the bolt pistol for that matter. But I think the old mark for the bolt gun is better. For perks, I generally prefer Carapace Unyielding. I think it's more reasonable to run Flak instead of Carapace on your ranged weapon, but it's up to you. For blessings, I think you take your pick between Puncture, Shattering, Pinning, and I don't generally like to take Cavalcade, not on at least this build, but I generally run like Puncture all the time and then either Shattering or Pinning. The other ranged weapon I also really like. It's a little bit better at whipping out fast because of its swap speed, better at taking out gunners and whatnot. Same thing. I generally prefer Flak on it since I'm not generally going to be shooting armor as much with it or at all. I think Flak Unyielding is good. It also has really good boss damage. So running Unyielding on it is not. It's not just for Reapers. It has really good boss damage once you get a bunch of a bunch of buffs up, team buffs, and your own perks rolling. For this mark of the shotgun, which is the tight pattern, not the duckbill, Mark 8, I generally prefer full bore all the time since it's so easy to proc. And then for the second blessing, I generally run sustained fire. You could run like Death Spitter, I think. I don't think Scattershot's too good on this variant, but yeah, I think Death Spitter can work. But again, the shotgun I kind of use more like a revolver or something. So yeah, I'll generally just run sustained fire. But I mean, the strength on Death Spitter is okay. Another shout out would be the bolt pistol. Again, haven't really tried the new mark. I've mainly been rolling the old one, but both are honestly fine. Flak Unyielding. Unyielding for this weapon is generally going to be just for the Reaper since you're not really going to be using it for bosses other than maybe putting bleed on it, but I don't use this weapon too much. I'll generally just run the shotgun if I want something for like anti-gunner, but I'll generally on Flak Unyielding, Puncture, and then probably Lethal Proximity. I'm not really sure if there's another Blessing, that would be better. I generally just like running lethal though, to be honest. You could also run the revolver, I think, be pretty good. But I ran it so much on Zealot back in the day that I just prefer these two weapons if I'm going to be running something for anti-gun, and the bolter if I think I'll need more boss damage, or if I want something a little bit less anti-gunner focused. For curios, ×3 toughness pretty much all the time. For perks, I think take your pick between, I'll pretty much always run extra toughness for the curio perks. After that, it's kind of your pick between gunner, stamina regen, combat ability regen. I think I do quite like revive speed. I think it's less noticeable and or yet less useful in Havoc compared to like Auric. So I haven't really been running revive speed, but I have been a revive speed enjoyer. So yeah, I think gunner, combat ability, stamina, and maybe bomber actually, because I feel like the only threat to Arbites is going to be from a lot of gunners or gas and bombers. So bombers are kind of anti-bomber resistance is kind of a sleeper pick in my opinion. But yeah, just kind of take your pick there, whatever you want. I just generally run all toughness and then like a mixture between gunner, combat, and stamina. Starting off with the top perks, no escape is generally what I prefer over Hammer of Judgment. You can run Hammer of Judgment if you prefer that attack speed over the movement speed, but I'll generally just run no escape. I preferred running it. I think it's a little bit more consistent, even though the attack speed is nice during hordes and whatnot. Up close and Force of Will are going to be our bread and butter. Toughness regen on this build, or in general, I should say. Force of will also work on any weak spot attack because we're running concussive. Target neutralized, I think, is relatively strong, but I prefer to run it on dogless builds over dog builds. I think it has the potential to really keep you topped up on toughness in a bad situation, or in a situation where maybe you have to take out a load of gunners and they're sort of chipping you away and you're not really meleeing anything. And your only real toughness regen is going to be like from your dog or from spending stamina and the like. So this can be a really nice way to keep topped up, but I find on dog builds I'm not really struggling for toughness a lot of the time. So I don't really like to run this on this build. Another one that I will sometimes run, but generally, again, not on this build, is shield plates. If I'm running the riot shield, I like to run it. It can be a really nice way to get toughness back, from if there's a couple shooters shooting you, but not exceedingly needed, especially with the castigators. So it's up to you if you like to run either of those, to be honest. I'll generally run Walk It Off. 15% toughness over 3 seconds after spending a stamina bar. This also works with, let me just get my toughness gone here. This also works by just swapping to a ranged weapon from your melee, or vice versa if the weapons have different states of stamina or different stamina amounts. So that's something worth noting. You don't have to sit there like push attacking, spending stamina that you might be needing in a second, that you're dodging like this and you don't want to spend that stamina. You can just swap your weapon back and forth to proc it. So that's pretty nice. Some people prefer Man and Cybermastiff, but 8 meters is not that close. Like, I think it's like about that distance. It's not letting me mark for some reason, but it's about that distance. And your dog is going to naturally just run off past that. I think you're going to be spending stamina doing whatever it is that you're going to be doing in the game. So I think that Walk It Off is more consistent. Razor Jaw got nerfed pretty heavily a couple times. I mean, it's 6 stacks instead of 8. It isn't affected by buffs as it was before. So I'll generally not run this. It can be okay, but I generally just don't think you need the extra dog damage, to be honest. So onto remote detonation, it will stagger around your dog and give a little bit of a dot to the enemies it hits. It's not super powerful, but it's pretty good if you have a lot of enemies grouped up and you want to get away from them, or you want to interrupt them, or whatnot. Be pretty good for large armor packs like this. And you can sort of give yourself some breathing room, save a teammate, that sort of thing. Something worth noting is that you can also remote detonate on bosses when your dog is latched onto them. So I can show that really quick. And it can actually push bosses, it can interrupt bosses, it can do anything like a grenade would, like a crack grenade or an Arbites grenade would. So that's pretty nice. Going down, I think ammo belt gets a lot of utility or a lot of value on Arbites in Havoc, especially if you're running one of the ranged weapons that I showed earlier in the video. I think you get a decent amount of ammo, right? 25%. That's like 20 something extra bolter shots. Pretty nice. Not necessarily mandatory, especially if you have a vet in the party, I feel. But definitely something that I might slot in if I'm going to be like the primary boss killer or the primary special sniper. We're pretty much always going to be taking concussive for obvious reasons. It just has so much utility on RBDs. I was not a believer before, and then I used it and I was like, oh, okay, it does all this other shit. Suppression protocols is something I might take, but I feel like on dog builds, it's not something I would ever pick over other perks, to be honest. It's not bad though. I feel like if you're hitting 3 or more enemies, you're going to be able to regen toughness pretty reliably, and that extra TDR is not going to necessarily be useful at that time within 5 seconds, so I don't generally go to my way to pick it. Imposing force is generally, if I want a little bit more defense, is generally what I'll pick on this build. If I have an extra perk over, like say, target neutralized, and it's a pretty nice chunk of TDR on elite kill or specialist kill, which your dog can get for you. So I'll generally slot into this over ammo belt or target neutralized, but it's up to you, honestly, out of like those 3. Canine morale, it also affects, or it also applies to you whenever your dog pounces a target. Something worth noting again is your dog doesn't actually need to kill the enemy for it to proc, it just needs to pounce the enemy, and then the enemy needs to die from any means. And this will be happening on big enemies, small enemies, whatever. If you are just passively letting your dog kill stuff, this has such a high uptime for you and anyone in your coherency. And this is TDR and toughness over 5 seconds. The toughness over 5 seconds isn't the greatest, but if it's killing multiple enemies pretty fast, it can add up, right? And it can be a nice little top up for your team. Not to mention the 20% TDR, which is really, really good. Part of the squad, I think, is also 7.5% TDR for you and allies. This is just better than the other ones. I mean, reload speed is okay. Extra damage versus staggered is also pretty good. I might take this if I do take that on dogless builds for obvious reasons, but I'll generally prefer the extra TDR over 10% damage. I don't like running the dog keystones. I think Go Get 'em has decent utility because it increases the maximum passive aggro range for your dog on enemies that you can't target, or like those would be the enemies that you would care that it's targeting if you're taking this. But I'll generally just save the point and not take one of the keystones. To be honest, I don't think Unleashed Brutality, it says it prioritizes elites and specialists, but I don't really find that I notice it's doing that more so than without one of the keystones, and the extra damage is meh, to be honest. I think this one, I think Go Get 'em is decent because it will be killing enemies faster and proccing canine morale more. So there's that argument, I guess, but I just prefer to save the point. On to Castigators. This is your own personal yellow toughness. It doesn't do anything super flashy. It makes you slightly faster, which is kind of cool. It can be interesting. It can be pretty funny to pop this and then have no escape popped, and you'll be walking, super fast at your enemies, 25% faster. So that's pretty fun. But yeah, you're pretty much immortal. Don't get grabbed by a trapper, and you're pretty much good. This can let you play not stupidly, but in ways that would otherwise be super risky or otherwise deadly. So this can be really nice, but you have to play in a way that is beneficial. It's not just going to give you a bunch of value by itself. It's not like Ogren Taunt or Veteran Show where you press button and you get value. With this, you press button and you don't die, and you need to do something with that. So I find that, pretty rewarding to play, but again, it's not super flashy. I would say it's probably the strongest ability, with Aquila being situational. I think Aquila can have a pretty big impact, but for this build, I think you have enough going on outside of your ability that being able to stay alive and being able to be that sort of anchor for your team, or that medic or whatever, special sniper, boss killer, whatever, is pretty nice. This ability modifier, Rid of Execution, 50% extra damage if you can kill 10 enemies during Castigators. This is sort of my floater perk as well. You don't need to take it, but I think it makes Castigator a little bit more fun, and I generally like to take this just for fun, but it is quite strong. I mean, you can take this out if you wish, but pretty fun perk in my opinion. Justified Measures did get nerfed from 15% damage down to 10. Still good. Our dog procs it, so very high uptime. We kind of have to take it, so whatever. Hold the Line, extra damage resistance on melee hit. Not very good, but we're really coming over here to get Target the Weak, and notably enemies will take 15% more melee damage once you stagger them. So that will apply to your teammates, which is cool, but it will also make other buffs or other you deal more damage better. So let's say that you were to just take Emperor's Fist, and this adds like 100 damage, I believe it's 99 or something extra damage to one of your attacks. Now, if you were to put it on Target the Weak, Emperor's Fist now does 115 more damage. So it instantly makes your other damage buffs better. It is such a good perk, and better than, all of these other you deal more damage perks, at least in my opinion. At least for your melee. But Emperor's Fist is something that I take sometimes, I don't take other times. It's more damage. I wish I could take Weight of the Lex instead, because after a heavy melee hits, you get the 15% for 5 seconds on both your melee, your following melee hits, as well as your following ranged hits. So you can do a heavy melee hit and then swap to your ranged and get a shot off with that 15% damage. Taking both of these is an option. You could do that, honestly, but going over here to Street Smarts, we don't really care about the extra dodge or the dodge duration, but it's not like a terrible perk. We just have to take it if we want to take Monstrosity Hunter. Arbites has really good ranged weapons for dealing with bosses, and our melee weapons, with all of these buffs, do a decent amount of boss damage, so I'll generally always take Monstrosity Hunter in Havoc. target priority is the one that I will generally take over like Weight of the Lex or even Emperor's Fist. I have to pick, because this is applied to not only our melee weapons if they're, above 75, but also our ranged hits. So this can be really nice for like taking out that gunner or taking out that reaper or whatever, or even initial boss damage. I think target priority and Weight of the Lex are both pretty similar, but because of the extra tax to have to take Emperor's Fist to get to Weight of the Lex, I'll pretty much always take target priority and only take weight if I can kind of afford it. 15% damage for 5 seconds after dodge. I mean, this is free damage, like unless enemies are taunted or something, we'll be able to dodge and get this off. So really nice uptime here for both of our weapons. Zealous Dedication. This takes us from like outside of a party like 7.5% critical chance to like 23.5. So pretty nice. Its biggest strength again is probably its uptime. That's pretty nice, but we like crit chance, right? Soul Guilt Scan. Weak spot hits gives weak spot strength. It's not, I guess, as good as it seems. It's only like, it's almost on the level of like Weighted or Emperor's Fist or like Target the Weak. Like it's a little bit better. I think its biggest strength is its uptime, and it's kind of hard to say like, oh, this is really bad, because it does have near 100% uptime for both your weapons. So pretty good. Necessary. I don't think a lot of these damage perks are necessary, honestly. You have such high damage to begin with, so if you don't take this, I don't think you're like gonna drastically miss it, to be honest, but it is a really nice damage buff. Execution Order, I think it's a really good keystone. I think Forceful does have some uses, especially with Break the Line, but I think with Aquila or Castigators, I think Execution Order is just going to be the better node, like 9 times out of 10. I think you can do fine with like Aquila and Forceful, but it depends. I don't think you need Aquila as often as Castigators necessarily, just because of the nature of the skill itself. So I think there is a argument to be made for like Aquila Forceful, but for Castigators, I do think Execution Order is a little bit better. Because of the cooldown regeneration, mainly for 8 seconds after marked kill. And enemies get marked really fast. Like if I just get a elite really quick, and then do that, you can see how quickly enemies get marked. And you have to imagine this happens like as they spawn, right? So there's going to be so many marked enemies, and a lot of the enemies that will be coming into melee or even in your line of sight with specials and whatnot will be marked already. So there's another sort of, I guess, overlooked positivity to this keystone, and that is you get wall hacks. And this is going to be on a lot of specials and a lot of gunners and whatnot. They're just going to be marked for you, which is kind of cool. Keeping Protocol, I mean, 30% more monstrosity damage is really good. You get damage resistance too, but we don't really care about that. Just tacking that on to like Monstrosity Hunter, you're going to have a massive amount of boss damage. And if you're running Bolter or like Arbites Mark 8 Shotgun, that is just so much damage. I generally like running Efficient Killer for that extra crit chance. This takes you up to like 30, like lower to mid 30s, depending on team passives and whatnot. So this is really nice. Necessary? No, I don't think so. You could maybe take this off if you want, but I think it's a really nice damage buff that's going to have a really high uptime. So I'll generally run this. I think Rebreather is also potentially an S tier perk, depending on maybe not S tier, maybe like A tier perk depending on the mission. Like if you have a pox gas mission, this can get so much value and let you play just in the gas 100% of the time and not really care. I generally don't run this 100% of the time off of like tox bomb missions, but if you run like this and some bomber resist on your curios, you can take away a lot of the weakness from RBDs, which is mainly like gunners, like smaller gunners and reapers and whatnot. If you're not running shield, that is. And like area of effect enemies like flamers, bombers, and tox bombers. So this could be pretty nice, but I don't think it's necessary, and it's definitely a bit more of a niche perk. And True Grit, I mean, if you're spending the points to like get down here, I mean, I guess you could take True Grit, but I feel like at least on this build, it's a little bit out of the ways. I think it can get value, especially in pugs, which is generally what I do, but especially with castigators, I feel like it's a bit overkill. So I'll generally run something like this. Like this is probably my most consistent build. So yeah, let me know if you try it out and you like it, or if you hate it and you think I'm stupid.